Hey folks, and welcome to a daily rating special. On today's show, we'll be looking at a very specific and brief period in Hollywood. In the 1970s, dozens of films were made that were largely cast with black actors and directed by black filmmakers. The films were made in an effort to mainly appeal to black urban audiences, and this subgenre was coined as Blaxploitation. Some of these films ended up having so much appeal that they were successful across racial and ethnic lines. But from the start of the genre in the 70s to present day, Blaxploitation has been a love for some and offensive to others. Today, Vince will review a handful of films from that era and will deconstruct this controversial genre of films. And whether you're a fan or not, there's no denying that this genre has given us lasting characters, funk and soul in the soundtrack of film, and influenced the work of directors such as Spike Lee and Quentin Tarantino. So it's going to be a great show, folks, so stay tuned and enjoy. Mr. Vincent Daly, how we doing, buddy?
Tom, how's it going?
It's going okay for me. We've got an interesting special here.
We do. One driven by kind of a natural curiosity with the term, with the era, with the music, of course.
Yeah, I think people get scared of the word Blaxploitation.
Yeah.
Because it seems like you're exploiting black people.
Right.
Because it's almost like what's in the name.
Right.
And kind of what's happening, but at the same time, It was all black cast and meant for black audiences, so it's not supposed to be pandering or insulting or stereotypical, but it's a very weird genre of films.
Yeah, it's a tough way to go about it as a term because it's both used to describe the film era, but paradoxically, it's also a criticism of the film, of both watchers at the time, audiences at the time in the early 70s, and still to today. We interact with this term because it is exactly Tarantino's style, and after watching these films, I agree. Tarantino just rips off these films constantly.
Well, and Tarantino later, because he's even promoting, he's been promoting a latest book and everything like that, and talking about how some of his earliest films are some of the best moments he had were being in these films, all with black people watching the Blaxploitation films of all black cast, because it's when he felt most manly.
Oh, interesting.
Because he was basically just raised by his mother and that's it.
Oh, wow.
So when the boyfriends would take him out to go see a movie, it was like this manly, awesome experience he was having. And he fell in love with these Blaxploitation films.
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe even the earliest that we probably, you and I, in our personal lives, came across this was with the comedy Black Dynamite.
Yes,
which
and it is
we
a
loved.
comedy.
It was awesome. But yeah.
Some great quotes. Such a ridiculous movie.
But Black Dynamite, I sell drugs in the community. It's so good. But yeah, a problematic, a paradoxical term, if you want to be highbrow with it, just because it does have... again, it's equally a criticism, but also the only way to describe the film era and the many films within that.
Well, it is now, and that's just the word that we have now.
Yeah,
for
exactly. So
it is interesting and great. Soundtracks came out of this.
Yes,
music. I mean, and I think what would you say the most notable is Superfly? Would you say?
Definitely Superfly's up there. I mean, what really drove my natural interest to this, because I had awareness of it. I had awareness of the term through kind of getting into film, but also I was really falling in love with every one of these soundtracks. And in a very real way, I said, is this worth your time? And that is usually the magical ingredient for why I dive into a special, that I have that curiosity of, is it worth your time,
And kind of like I said in the intro, there's around 30, a little bit more than 30 of these films made in a very short period of time.
Shotgun blast.
So how do you go? This is kind of one of our specials, like an essential special kind of, the most important, the essential films kind of. How do you parcel through that? You know what I mean?
Sure.
What's...
A lot of research.
Okay, all right, yeah.
A lot of research. The through line between these 5 films, though, is that each one is led by a monumental musician that is tied into the soundtrack in some way. So kind of, obviously, very excited to go into these films. I'll be off the gate, and I'll say not all these films are great. But at the same time, all of these films sound soundtracks are notable in some way. So even if I'm not saying go watch the movie, appreciate the soundtrack because that is a standout. And I've really fallen in love with all of these 5 films because of their music and their soundtrack to it.
And I think that's a great segue into our first film because of how well the main theme did. So let's all jump back to 1971. This is Shaft, directed by Gordon Parks, and tell us a little bit about it.
Yep, so right off the back, I'll be leading off with music. Isaac Hayes is behind the Oscar-winning soundtrack here, and I would now like to recite the very first line of the song by Mr. Hayes in the way I can. Who is the black private dick that has the sex machine to all the chicks? That's Shaft, you're damn right. And that's how the song goes. I mean, what better summary do I have to give to Shaft than that? Shaft is a private eye. He works both sides of the law, and when he takes on a job to find a kidnapped daughter, he's pulled in opposite directions as the case gets bigger and bigger. Shaft is definitely in that sweet spot for early 70s films of maverick cop, but he's not a cop, and is definitely a middle ground to a lot of styles at the time, Dirty Harry included, for sure.
Yeah, is it safe to say when it comes to blaxploitation in general, the films we'll be covering, so much is almost like action crime with a little bit of comedy because it's ridiculousness? Like it's all very actually the same genre.
Sure.
Is that fair to say?
It's not the same genre. I mean, the films we cover today are all crime films, are all kind of gangster films or around the law.
Okay.
But honestly, the honorable mentions for this list are probably Dolomite, which is more of an emphasis on comedy.
Yep.
And then even like something like Blackula, which is just a spoof on Dracula. Yeah. I know, if I could say the name with a straight face.
Right.
So it's
there is a mix there.
Yeah, I think if there's a crux of why, or what rather I should say, the point of me walking away with this special is that these aren't just a genre; it's a film era, really.
Gotcha.
Because these across those 30 films that were, and probably more, honestly, that just don't have any sort of credits to them. These 30 films are all over the map. They're just kind of capitalizing, and that it's more of an era of film than just a singular genre. If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
This film operates Shaft on such a level of 70s coolness. He wears this cool leather jacket. First seconds of the film, he's already walking into traffic, flipping off cab drivers. It's just such a boiled down 70s coolness to it, and so many great one-liners from him. Someone asks where he's going, and he says, "Going to get laid," and then he laughs in his face. It's fantastic.
The subtitle, it's Shaft. Shaft's his name, Shaft's his game.
That's perfect.
Like, they're unbelievably fun films.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Shaft is having a lot of fun as far as his character too. There is a seriousness to the plot in the sense that there's this kidnapped daughter, but
sure,
Shaft's just doing his thing. You know what I mean? He's the sex machine for all the chicks. But there are countless moments in this film that Richard Roundtree, of course, plays Shaft here, has such quick comebacks, like really witty snapbacks at people talking to him. It's a genuinely funny movie. I compare this something to like Al Pacino from Heat, where half of the entertainment is seeing what he's going to say or what's coming out of his mouth.
Wow, I was not expecting a Heat reference. Yeah. One of the best films ever. Okay,
right. So
I see what you're saying, though.
There's an enjoyment to just like, okay, what he's going to be out of pocket. How's this look out? How does this work out with people giving him crap? But yeah, it's very enjoyable for that reason. Let's talk about some of the context of Shaft as well. This is not the first film of the era. That title actually goes to the X-rated film Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song in 1971. So same year, but not given that crown of very first of the genre or the era. However, like most emerging styles, it did not solidify until later with Shaft being released. So I think not even being controversial here, I think this is the start of it all. This is what made it go electric. Almost immediately after this film's release, there was backlash from the public around these films. Honestly, a very useful research was a Newsweek article that was released at the time called Blacks versus Shaft, and it outlines the stereotypes of the film are damaging. And this was a immensely useful resource in kind of understanding some of the social commentary at the time. I would say Shaft specifically, the social commentary, it rides the line between, or Shaft specifically, I should say, rides the line between working with the cops and taking jobs from his street connections. I think this works because, frankly speaking, he hates both sides. Shaft is just Shaft, he's in for himself. And not only is Shaft acting for no one but himself, but it's his own sense of justice. And that's where these maverick, Dirty Harry-esque type of feelings are coming into play, or at least my feelings on the stylings of the film.
It's funny that you went back to the original kind of articles that were written around this era.
Yeah.
I think that's important because, now something like this would never, ever, ever be done.
Right,
You know what I mean? It's just like it's just not acceptable anymore for modern day Hollywood.
Right.
It's funny because Tarantino also was just noting that this is tied for worst decade ever of movie making.
Really? And he,
with the 50s and 80s.
He pulls so much from it. I mean,
right, exactly. Well, him and him alone, kind of. But it's funny to get that, what was it like back then?
Yes.
So it was a lot of commentary of this specific film.
Right.
It wasn't so much the era or what this was turning into. Was so much commentary of...
It was the fear that a character is being glorified where the struggle should be highlighted.
I see. Okay, gotcha.
And that really is the root of it. And honestly, even to my own process... Normally, I don't go back. It's all about watching in the modern day, but specifically for understanding this term, which was born back then, I needed to kind of understand what was the original outrage to it. And like I said, Shaft, not an amazing film, but it's got a lot of character, and I find this characterization to be identical with any hard-boiled detective story coming out at the time, Dirty Harry being the pinnacle in 1971, same year. I certainly understand the outrage of protesters in this era, and the stories that these stories are to focus on the criminality of it or glorifying the criminality of it. But watching in modern day, Shaft seems to be equally obsessed with making these maverick peacemaker characters as really any of the type of action films coming out at the time. So it seems to, at least for this first entry, again, as this type of styling is forming, it seems to be more on the shoulders of giants of other type of films at the time. If anything, I would point to Shaft and say, if anything, it's a little generic for what else is coming out. It kind of gets lost into it.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah. So when you boil it down, I would say the action is passable, not great. It is for the personality of Roundtree and his performance of Shaft. I mean, obviously, this gives birth to countless sequels and remakes. There's a Shaft in the 90s that Samuel Jackson plays it.
Awesome, yeah.
And I believe there's even like a 2000s one that kind of gets them all back on screen, a la Marvel style. Even. So I didn't watch those, so I don't know. Honestly, though, you are watching Shaft for the personality and Roundtree, and it is tremendous. That personality is what spawned it all, and trying to recapture a little of the entertainment in this film is why I think it's worth it in modern day, at least slightly. We're going to go ahead and start it off with Shaft at 63.
Ooh, okay, all right. 63, okay movie.
Yeah, okay movie.
Like you said, you're there for character.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's outrageousness. I think this very well could, or maybe even some of these, Shaft specifically, though, very well could have a better enjoyment, not in a so bad it's good, because it is a good movie on its own.
Yeah.
But there is an extra enjoyment, maybe, because of that reason. Again, the huge personality there.
Oh, for sure. All right, now moving on. Welcome, folks, to 1972. This is now Superfly, directed by Gordon Parks Jr. So that's kind of cool and odd and weird.
Keeping it in the family, I guess.
Yeah. So how did Superfly kind of fair and like this. To me, it was the most name recognizable, at least.
Sure,
you know what I mean?
And I'm happy to say is probably the best of the bunch, honestly. Superfly's soundtrack is done by Curtis Mayfield and is a heavyweight. So many great tracks here, and I think Superfly might be the best as far as Mayfield's performance and his albums, period. This also has a great live performance in this that is just largely uncut and kind of serves, or the film serves as a great way to see Mayfield's band in action.
That's awesome.
Yeah, there was definitely an extra level enjoyment for that reason.
And oddly enough, only one nomination for a Grammy.
Really?
Best original score. Yeah.
Wow,
No Oscars, no nothing, no wins either.
Yeah, and I think that definitely takes a sharp nosedive off after Shaft.
Okay, gotcha.
But yeah, I will say Superfly, not to give away the GOAT, but Superfly was phenomenal. I really enjoyed Superfly. I'll start with some of the context here, just to give, and I'll obviously be building on the narrative here of what this criticism and what this film era means with that term, but the aspect of critique of Blaxploitation is that these films are equally painting a glamorous and disparaging picture of the demographic. It's also insulting to audiences at the time and audiences now to have characterizations like this. And with so many types of film in the genre, the criticism is varied from film to film. So really tracking this back for each film, doing that research to see, well, why was this one a problem, and the growing criticism at the time. Again, the short 4 years of this being a talking point. So I want to say right away, I completely understand how Superfly specifically, being a movie about pimps and dealers, is not the depiction the community wanted at the time. But I have to stress that even watching this movie 50 years later, I can say that this is a fantastic film. This is like
that's awesome. It's
proto Goodfellas. This is proto. Oh, it's so good.
The way it moves, just the way in the criminal world, kind of.
Yeah. Just goal oriented around dealing drugs. Right. It was a really good gangster film, and
awesome.
I loved this. I love this movie. Superfly shows us a much rougher look at the city. If I didn't say it before with Shaft, all of these take place in Manhattan. All 5 of these films, very interesting as well.
In Harlem a lot.
Uptown Manhattan, but also I don't know how Hollywood or film studios were shooting so much in Manhattan. It was kind of interesting as well to see that. Why aren't these being done on studio sets? So in that as well, again, kind of leans to more modern films because they're being shot on these city streets.
It almost feels real. It doesn't feel like you're in a studio because you're not.
Yeah. And seedy Manhattan in the 70s, pre-Giuliani. No, I'm joking. But Manhattan was a shithole for a long time. So it's interesting as a time capsule there. But a much rougher look at the city and a much rougher protagonist. Our main protagonist is Priest, played by Ron O'Neal, and he's nothing like Shaft. He is a pimp, he is a coke dealer, and a small-time crime lord, even. Part of the reason I think this rises above the potential criticism of glorifying just a criminal is that Priest's character arc is he wants to escape the game. He hates, what he has to do as a dealer. So it's about, yes, getting one big deal. He's trying to push like 30 keys of coke in one big swing to get out of the game, but it is to get out of the game.
Such a good classic story.
You're right.
Yeah.
It sounds like Blow, sounds like Goodfellas, And that's why this is, it really did hold up. So the entire plot is him trying to escape it, and I think, again, that's at least some of my sensibility on why this maybe escapes some of that criticism, where later films we will see how that doesn't escape. He's main plot. It's real simple. He's pushing 30 keys of coke. That's it. A constant theme as well to the drug dealing, that they are forced to resort to it, forced to continue with it by dealing with the man, and the man is the law. So when it comes to
the subtitle is Superfly, never a dude like this one. He's got a plan, to stick it to the man.
There we go. That's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah, and also a reason why this gets the crown for Curtis Mayfield's soundtrack is
so white too. Even
I know. Even when I was reading the Isaac Hayes thing, I was like, "Am I really gonna try and do this?" I was like, "I'm just gonna read it straight." I'm not.
Well, Tarantino's whiter than us. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's apparent. Watch any interview with Tarantino and a fellow black man on stage, and you will see him make a fool of himself. It is painful. It was painful.
It's hilarious.
But in Curtis Mayfield's soundtrack, this is one of the only few that actually has storytelling in it, and the songs are about. They can't escape. They can't, the man is on them. These characters on how they're abused by the law, that tied into the soundtrack, that tied into the story. I was real positive on this one. Superfly is a dynamite movie.
Did you go into it knowing it was big or knowing it was good, looking at like critics or reviews? Because it's tough because with these specials, you're doing a lot of research.
There's so much research.
So it's hard to know.
I was surprised what I liked and what I didn't. I think to memory, Superfly is the best reviews out of all of these. Maybe Shaft is up there.
But you didn't really. You did go in at least with
semi-positive expectations.
Okay, gotcha.
But if anything, to the research element of this, Superfly being a pimp, Priest being a pimp. I thought that's where the criticism was going to hold up. Honestly,
gotcha. Okay.
Also, an amazing supporting cast. So many great little bit characters. There's a wonderful element here that instead of it just being introduced to the law, we're introduced to a criminal underworld, which is much more. You're going to get much more eccentric characters. You're going to get much more cool characters. His partner in crime, Eddie, played by Carl Lee, is honestly so good. Up there with the best supporting characters you can ask for in a gangster film. He's so entertaining, and again, not to compare it to. It is the Pesci. It is the Pesci. You called it. It's the Joe Pesci effect.
When you have a movie like this and dealing with just like crime stuff, honestly, you want the characters on screen. That's what makes the movies good.
Absolutely.
The good character and the good portrayal.
Yeah, and so much more playground to build these type of characters in a criminal world versus where Shaft was like kind of both sides of the law. He's just dealing with cops. There's much more of a reality we're introduced to for it. So,
and Carl Lee, like you said, his name is plays Eddie. Any other like attributes that we can?
I was researching a lot. I don't think he has even a picture on IMDb. So
I don't think he does either. No,
it was tough. And then it doesn't help that Superfly as well remade in like 2017 or 2018. So
yeah.
Yep. We see these kind of coming around. Very different tone from what I understand, but didn't watch them, so we'll see. Honestly, I just want to touch on how refreshing this story is because it's not just boiling it down to a tough, hard-boiled detective. You know what I mean? There's exciting things done with this film. And it's an exciting world to see. Again, I understand the criticism with this a lot, but there are nuances to how it escapes that criticism, and it's a really good movie. It's like a really, really good movie. So one thing that I feel is a bit dated in Superfly is that there is this huge, way too long sex scene. I'm talking like over 5 minutes, but I am knocking it because it's like it's wonderful, but it's just way too long. It's 5 minutes. I do think it's an important note though, because if you think about the theaters that are housing this, just like the first, the Sweetbacks, whatever, I forget the thing.
That was rated X.
Yeah. Exactly. These films were filling kind of a soft core aspect to get people in the theater to begin with. Obviously, the theaters in the 70s as well, kind of a different world entirely. So.
Yeah, and this was not, it wasn't the major blockbuster screenings. The screens. This was on, a lot of these probably like in Harlem, specific parts of LA, things like that. Yeah, absolutely.
So having this play and have softcore aspects, it's something I got to note because I definitely. I thought it kind of took away from the film at a certain point because it just runs on forever.
Right. Yeah.
But it's also an interesting note because again, this is style, this is the era, this is studio involvement, kind of playing into what they're kind of trying to create for the demographic. So
yeah, it's definitely safe to. All these are rated R, by the way.
Yeah, for sure.
And short, like these runtimes. So, for instance,
I was
Superfly,
loving-
hour and a half. Must have been great, snappy.
great.
You're in, you're out.
It was great. Great movie. Didn't
Yeah.
need it. Didn't need much more, you know? Yeah, I would say my final notes with Superfly in a post-Tarantino, post-Scorsese world. This film not only feels quite modern, but you can watch it almost as a template.
Wow.
I'll mention it a few times, and specifically with Black Caesar, but I was kind of side-eyeing Tarantino throughout all of this because... Wow, I don't know. He really it's a little bit rip-off-ish. I'll go into on the shoulders of giants. This, kind of what I always say there. But I'll tell you what. I mean, Superfly, to the credit of the film itself, despite any stylings that are taken and used and tones used, it is a dynamite film on its own and stands up in modern day to the people that are ripping it off. But if you can have some scenes in a film this old that compete with the pacing, the styling of what I would say is modern, 90s forward type of crime film, I think that goes to show how great this film is. Give it a watch. We're going to go ahead and give Superfly an 82.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
It was a good movie.
82, very good score.
Yeah.
That's a very good movie.
Absolutely. And so enjoyable and so sharp in its editing. There's one last. I'll do the last note.
No,
here.
please.
There's one. There's a scene where he gets his guys, his pushermen, to start pushing out the cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
The way it's edited is so good. Like I don't know. It makes me appreciate some more gangster films that I love a little less because it's done. It did it first. I can't say anyone else did it. So. But yeah, a really great time, and gets the crown for the soundtrack as well. Mayfield's soundtrack might be his best album, period, on this one. No less that live performance that is largely uncut in this film.
So can I say, were you surprised of the lack of recognition at the time? I'll just go back to Shaft.
Sure.
I noticed that it won the Oscar for Best Original Song.
Uh-huh.
It was nominated also for the Oscar of Best Music of Original Dramatic Score. I mean, it's nominated for a BAFTA. Richard Roundtree was nominated for Golden Globe of Most Promising Newcomer.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I mean, a lot of the noms and the wins for Shaft were music based.
Yeah.
But he did get the nom for a Golden Globe, which was awesome.
It was big.
And if Superfly is this good, are you kind of surprised that no one was picking up on this?
Yeah. Maybe that's falling to the criticism at the time, because again, I can explain why I don't think it falls into the bad side of the Blaxploitation kind of designation for this.
Yeah.
The label for it. But at the time, maybe, already the building pressure on the Academy. I don't know, honestly. So.
All right. Well, an 82. And folks, if you're new to this for whatever reason, 82 on the daily ratings is a very good score.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're above the 80s, something you should absolutely pretty much
make time
for. Now we say 85 and above is actually
must watch.
Must watches
before you die kind of list.
Right. So that's just to get just to show you how good an 82 is.
Yeah.
That's exciting, and I'm happy for you watching. You must have been in heaven for an hour and a half.
Oh man, it was just such a good time. It was a truly great film, and again, downright shocking how modern it felt.
So cool.
So yeah.
All right, let's see if we can keep the ball rolling here, Vin, and we'll move on to our next film. Okay, so now we're still in 1972, same year.
Right.
This is called Trouble Man. This one's directed by Ivan Dixon. And again, out of all the films, why did we approach this?
So Trouble Man was definitely ripe for a cut from this list, especially with some of those runners up.
Okay.
Primarily, I kept it because the legendary Marvin Gaye composes here, and unfortunately, it's not a super memorable score, but the title track for Trouble Man is a great song. Honestly, a really, really wonderful feel to it. And of course, I love Marvin Gaye, as far as a musician. Unfortunately, a lot of the other parts of the score, I don't know how much involvement he had in it. Just kind of sounds like a TV movie at the time, and it does cheapen it a little bit.
Oh, okay, all right.
I'll introduce this. Originally, Trouble Man landed on the list because of Marvin Gaye, and again, the through line of lead musicians kind of running these soundtracks, or notable musicians. And then in pre-research, I thought Mr. T was in it. Like I Pity the Fool. Not at all the case. Mr. T is the character, not the actor.
Again, subtitle, Trouble Man. His friends call him Mr. T. His enemies call for mercy.
Oh, nice. I love
So
this.
you thought Mr. T was...
I thought it was Mr. T. It was
makes
not. I
sense.
thought it was a super young Mr. T, too, and no.
So he's played by Robert Hooks.
Yes.
So how does Robert Hooks do?
He
As a
does all
lead.
right. He does all right.
Okay, so not
This
this
is-
electric character as we get in the previous two.
Yeah. The reason why Trouble Man was almost a cut because at the time, critically panned.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Definitely had a similar, which we've been uncovering on the normal podcast, folks. In case you're not, you're a new listener to just the special, of these older films having their reviews not be reviewed in modern day. They're like the old reviews being pulled on for, if you will, Rotten
Yes.
Tomatoes, Metacritic.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's pulling from the old reviews. And even at the time, I mean, this is really, really poorly reviewed on Rotten Tomatoes. I think a 14. I don't know if that changes too often, but
It's got a 14.
14.
But see, this is what comes in. This is why the Daily Ratings is great. Because it's got a
Exactly.
14 critic,
Yep.
63 audience.
Yeah, this is a generic movie. This is definitely a boring movie, but in no way this is a 14, or anything like that.
Right.
Even among the
Because
criticism,
this
it
is
could
we're in
potentially-
Catwoman territory here.
Yeah, for sure. 14 is definitely Catwoman
So
territory.
we always say we always use the language of it's functioning as a film.
Yes.
It's just not that great of a film.
Right.
Okay.
It's not electric to recommend and really not worth your time.
Was this one dragging a bit? I mean, it's weird to say, but it's a whole hour and 39 minutes.
Yeah, I will say I was kind of interested in the premise a little bit, but it's just I don't know, it's not doing it. Trouble Man is about Mr. T, not the actor, who is a man of his community. People kind of bring the Trouble Man their troubles, and he solves it for them. Kind of reminded me of the martial arts film Ip Man, where he's just like a community leader.
Okay.
But also willing to get his hands dirty, as all these are kind of, action films at heart in some way.
So it's not. Is it just is it a gun for hire basically, or it's a
no,
little bit more than that?
More so, people will be complaining about something, or again, bring him his troubles. That's how he gets the name Trouble Man, and he solves the troubles.
Gotcha. Okay,
So,
gotcha.
Not squeaky clean by any means, but a much more positive role in solving issues and offering help in the community. They come to him almost like a Godfather, which came out the same year. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It came out early that year.
Yeah.
So once again, we see kind of a weird pool of films grabbing from films hitting on same themes at the time. The early 70s, it's wild.
70s are great for movies.
Yeah. So, but similar, kind of Godfather feel. People are coming to him for help, and then Trouble Man gets it done, basically. Mr. T, not the actor, gets framed for murder by the man and has to prove his innocence to solve his own trouble. Not a bad movie. Certainly not the Rotten Tomatoes 14 on it, but just very boring. It's just a boring movie.
Damn. Because with that premise, that could be.
Yeah.
You got some fun to work with there.
Absolutely. Similar to Shaft, very much both sides of the law.
Okay. Sure.
I think primarily here my criticism for Trouble Man is just no performance stands out on its own. Just one scene kind of drifts into another. A perfect example of this is there's a very crooked cop that gives him shit the entire time, and he books him just for a night. And the very next scene, like literally the scene is the door closes. The very next scene, he's out. There's no weight to that. There's no. I mean, it's not a long runtime.
Right.
You got the time to maybe show some, some reflection or anger in jail. Yeah. It's just very inconsequential, the whole film. It's just kind of moving along scene to scene, not really great. Also, another problem I have is this character is like a Mary Sue, honestly. Mr. T, not the actor, is good at everything. He doesn't struggle in anything whatsoever. He's good at billiards. He's good at kung fu. He's a community leader. There is no commonality to him and his character. And staying cool under pressure, that is definitely something that all of the main characters of these films have. That's a part of that 70s coolness, like I said in Shaft. But he's just also unfazed by things. And sure, maybe that was meant to come off as confidence, but it's very underwhelming.
Is he like the Black Terminator?
Maybe. He is, he's not... He's on a different planet, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
The confidence is oozing.
Yeah, but also like unengaged, which is bad. Okay. So they try to cast him in a light of both kind of good and bad. And honestly, the bad falls short because the bad side of it is just kind of summarized as he's a hustler. We never really get to see the bad side of it. And again, this kind of plays into this... odd to say Mary Sue with something so old,
right?
But yeah, he's just kind of good at everything, and nothing's a conflict. My issue isn't with the characterization there. My issue is that the film itself isn't putting emphasis on conflict to make us engage. You need the salt and pepper to it.
Yeah.
So. I will say, it's kind of semi-interesting. He is a Robin Hood type figure. Having that in this era is cool. A lot of films are taking old films, old stories, and changing them up a little bit. But somewhere in the execution, this is a real snoozer. And again, not long at all.
Yeah.
Not long at all. So keep in mind... I kept this on the list for a few reasons. Keep in mind, Marvin Gaye is one of the most notable names attached to this and a phenomenal opening track to it. But even though, this lackluster film isn't great or doesn't feel great to recommend on a special. I like bringing heavy hitters to a special.
Sure.
Especially how much research I put into these things and whatnot. I think it does illustrate how these movies... in essence, were cash grabs for studios. If there's anything leaning to the criticism of Blaxploitation, it is that these studios were pumping out 30 plus films in 4 years for what? Money.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, again, for the study, I maybe it's my own bias of me coming up with a list, but I think Trouble Man deserves a slight spot on here because it illustrates that some of these movies were just not good and pumped out. And I think Trouble Man is that. So we're going to go ahead and give Trouble Man a 35.
Ooh, 35.
Yeah, not a 14, though.
That's true. That's a great point.
Very melodramatic to have this listed at a 14.
35, though. Check out the soundtrack, maybe not the movie.
Right.
Kind of what that says.
That's why I said in the beginning. Walk away knowing that each one of these soundtracks is worth your time. That's the through line.
All right, Vin, we're going to keep on walking here across the street. So we're still in 1972.
Right.
3 movies in a row. 1972, this is Across 110th Street. This is directed by Barry Shear. I'm kind of most interested of why this is on the list.
Sure.
This has... it's weird to say, but like a heavier white cast sharing in this. You know what I mean? But it still counts. Why does this count to be in that era?
I think definitely because of the script and the script alone.
Okay.
And I'll get into that for some issues with the film. But music here done by Bobby Womack. The soundtrack has been repurposed quite a lot, most notably for 2007's American Gangster, a phenomenal movie in its own right.
Big time.
But that title track, Across 110th Street, phenomenal. Right off the bat, the look of this film is very sharp. Great camera work, great close-ups. This was yet another moment that I said, wow, I can strongly see the origin of Tarantino's style.
Oh, cool. Okay.
I wouldn't say it's exactly rip-off territory yet, but wow, was it illuminating. And I get where maybe that was a criticism of his style early on as well, when maybe we're talking about Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown. Definitely Jackie Brown was going for it. So the opening shootout is a perfect example of this, and is also the powder keg that kicks off the story. Once again, set in New York, we focus on kind of a generic midtown mafia family versus Harlem drug gangs by the name above 110th Street. Three guys, part of, I think, I don't know if they've done jobs for the families in the past, but three guys catch wind of a deal going down between the two gangs, a cash deal for $300K, and they knock it over. And that really gives us many, many players of the story. Hard to say. I would almost call this an epic. It's definitely an ensemble cast. What? There are so many characters.
An hour and 42.
Yeah, where are they fitting?
It's interesting, and Anthony Quinn is in it.
Yeah.
Who's like a big time actor too. This is where I'd say just right away this feels separate. This definitely jumps out as kind of an outlier a little bit.
Sure. And maybe this is the studio trying to meld different demographics coming to this. Maybe they're shooting for, award season or something like that, trying to create a bridge in the narrative. Unfortunately, Across 110th Street is really messy. It's a very messy film. It gets points for being original, but it is juggling a surprising amount to its detriment. We follow all three criminals individually that knock over this, plus their love interests. We then follow an entirely separate two main detectives having their own police drama, and honestly, it's probably my new vote for earliest buddy cop film because they hate each other. Yeah.
What was on that list?
We did 48 Hours.
That's right.
And that is much, that's almost a decade later.
Yeah, right. But this has that same feel, that same back and forth.
Yes, hate each other. They have to earn each other's respect through the work. Absolutely.
So was the writing good, or was the writing messy along with the film itself, too?
Unfortunately, it's very messy. Okay. And added to that, we have more characters. We have then two more hitmen, one Italian, one black, that, again, is added to this. So, this story, it's trying to juggle a lot. It's certainly ambitious. And trying to give everyone's perspective on their take of crime. But messy is the word. Messy is definitely the word with this one. I would say acting and writing is definitely what sinks this one for me, where otherwise I would be very positive on it because I give points for originality, especially for appreciation of how that originality can be in 50 plus years of film runway,
Right.
If something is still striking me as original, that's great for a modern day watch, It stands apart.
It's based on a book as well.
Oh, really?
On a novel. Yeah.
Interesting.
Just called Across 110th.
Maybe that's definitely part of the reason why so many characters are balanced.
It does a lot of the heavy lifting, kind of. Like a lot of the work is already done.
Right. But yeah, this acting and writing plays definitely into my thoughts on how this film fits into the Blaxploitation era. There is a positive portrayal. In Detective Pope, played by Yafit Kodo, he was an alien, so I recognized him slightly.
Yeah.
He's really the only true lawful character. Even in direct comparison to his partner, he looks like a saint. So the film is doing something to not make the bad guys glorified, and Kodo's performance as well is trying to do something with having a narrative that we shouldn't be looking up to this. There is kind of maybe that ties into the book itself, but there's something there taking it to the next level. But the film really abuses having criminals as the bulk of the roles. The script just throws out racial slurs a lot and is just very excessive. For instance, the mafia hitman uses slurs in almost every sentence, and so often that I really just point to it as lazy writing at that point. Like, it is every single sentence. And my criticism is that lazy writing is lazy writing. You know what I mean? That's not. And you opened my eyes a little bit on this being a book. I didn't know that coming into this.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's true to that, but I think for the scope of this project and this special, this is more negative than having a main character be a pimp or something. The script uses the era as a crutch, and once again, I think that shows a story that the studio is just saying, yeah, pump it out,
It's just another one, right, yeah.
Exactly. And that plays into the laziness of the production, too. So, and the messiness of the editing, because this film is very messy. There's also just some bad overacting here, very soap opera levels of yelling, and is just not the best. Shocking, and I mean shockingly, Tom. There are some takes left into this that had me screaming at the screen. Why would you keep that in? Why would you ever not take one more? I think a character burps at one point. I was dying. I was dying laughing at it. Yeah, I think the character that stood out the most was the Harlem gang leader, Doc Johnson. And there's just so many lines. Like, he's just like, so they just let him loose probably on the set. I have no idea what I have no idea what happened. But yeah, I feel like this suffered from sloppy production, and for that, and for me in this study, I think that shows how studios were just kind of capitalizing on the style of the era.
Yeah.
And if anything, that is the takeaway. I'm not really concerned with does it pass kind of, is it something appropriate to watch today? It's more so understanding how are studios using this and how are they making money off of it? If anything, maliciously there.
Yeah.
So.
And it doesn't sound like this had a ridiculousness to it that our 3 films previously had. Even with Trouble Man, which might have been boring, he himself was just like a ridiculous character, kind of.
Right, a superhero.
And this seems just more tame. Is that a good?
No, not more tame, more intense.
Okay.
Yeah, but bad intense, like soap opera crying.
Like you were saying,
it's just overkill. I think overall it is a decent gangster film with a lot of originality, and I mostly give points to that originality, but again, almost fails in its try to be an epic and telling the story of both sides of 110th Street. I would say it's hard for me to not look at this film and once again see a template for crime films to come for decades, and specifically 90s even to today. There's a way to do it right, and that's Superfly, and there's a way to do it wrong, and that's Across 110th Street. We're going to go ahead and give Across 110th Street a 52.
Ooh, 52, okay.
Yeah.
I'm kind of surprised that you kind of surpassed it there. Like it's 2 ticks above 50.
Yeah, there's, if anything, I like some of the performances, but again, messy is the word for this one.
Lackluster for sure.
Yeah.
Wow, Vin. Okay, all right. So before we get to our last film here, folks, we just want to remind people, we don't have a producer segment here with the specials, but remember, we're going off the value for value model. Are you finding the podcast valuable? Are you enjoying these specials, which definitely take Vin some extra time here? And are you on the website and enjoying the website? Well, if you could you give us back some value then? You go to thedailyratings.com, you go to the donations tab, and through monetary support, any amount that you want, any amount of value that you're getting, peg a number to it, send it our way, and along with it, send a note too, so we can read it here on air and have some fun as well. We want to stay away from corporate advertising. If we had corporate advertising, we probably couldn't do this special.
Right, yeah. We'd be walking on eggshells.
And, it's kind of another way. I think more and more podcasts are going to be doing it. It's how we're operating. And we think it could be something really great.
Absolutely.
And as always, tell somebody about it. Get the show out there. That just helps us out so much as well.
Absolutely.
Getting the name out there. So we appreciate you all who help produce and continue to produce, and those of you who will as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Vin, and with that, welcome to 1973. This is the Godfather of Harlem, the cat with the .45 caliber claws. We're in 1973.
That's amazing.
This is Black Caesar.
Cat with the 45.
The cat with the 45
awesome.
Caliber claws.
That's amazing.
73 Black Caesar.
Yep.
This is directed by Larry Cohen. What do we get here?
Yeah, so by no means the last Blaxploitation film or even the last good one. I would say that probably goes to the original Dolomite. Like with every entry here, we are covering this for the soundtrack as well, and Black Caesar is done by none other than James Brown and is phenomenal.
Okay.
This soundtrack gets a strong second place for implementation here. I would say if it wasn't for the live performance in Superfly, I would say this gets the win for sure, because there are a lot of songs that James Brown is providing.
Okay.
And they are appropriate. They are tying in thematically. he really did a phenomenal job here. And on top of James Brown being legendary, phenomenal soundtrack.
Very cool. Very cool.
This is a proper gangster film, though, and I would say largely operates on the rule of cool. That usually means music plus crime, and again, that's
So
where
true.
this James
So true,
Brown soundtrack really comes into play. So, Fred Williamson plays gangster Tommy Gibbs, aka Black Caesar, the cat with I really love that, the cat with the 45 caliber claws. That's awesome. We follow his rise to power and in a pretty significant story arc. I was really surprised how much development they packed into this runtime, and even though American Gangster used Across 110th Street in its soundtrack, this was like a proto-American Gangster for how much we see his rise to power.
Ooh, okay, I like this.
And really solid for that reason. I was very much enjoying Williamson's performance here in this, and I was just surprised how much development they packed into this thing.
So how much do you think also, now that we're in 73, Godfather now has had some time. I'm sure this was all post-Godfather. Potentially even writing and everything like that.
Yep.
So were we even the fact that they say Godfather of Harlem, was it really, could you tell it's trying to be that?
No.
Does it resemble that in any way? Or?
Yeah, it's its own thing, luckily.
Okay.
It is its own thing. But for what it's worth, 2007's American Gangster is almost identical to this film. You know what I mean? It's just how he rises to power.
Very
and how
cool.
much it's about, his family that were supporting him, or his family that was with him when he was nothing, and then that changes as he kind of abuses the power. Then,
so I'll make one more note here.
Sure.
American Gangster, very long film. This film, an hour and 27.
Right.
It's our shortest on the list here.
Oh my god,
hour and 27.
It packs it in. I said packed. I did say packed. I didn't realize it was the shortest, though.
Mm-hmm,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
I mean, we're talking about minutes here, but yeah.
Yeah. This film has some really fantastic scenes, and I would say they are brought to the next level with James Brown's soundtrack here. And it's really everything you want out of the gangster film, being the rule of cool. Great cinematography here as well. I will admit, a lot of risks are taken to create interesting shots. Some definitely don't pay off. I'll say right there. Some just don't. They're not good shots. But but a handful really hit in a big way. And again, I think these films, they are doing creative things to push the boundary, and by a result, filmmakers look back to these and they grab the styles they like. They pick and choose. And, absolutely. That's what's kind of been a through line here. I would say there is kind of a cartoonish vengeance to the action and violence here, especially against racist characters we interact with. This special, like I said, had me side-eyeing Tarantino the whole time, but this one specifically reminded me of Django Unchained, where violence is amped up for the more racist the character is, which, hey, enjoyable, but just once again, had me looking at Tarantino. I said, someone did this, and you probably know this film very well.
But is that such a bad, like as you say, on the shoulder of giants?
Yes.
What do you know what I mean? Like, what's the problem there?
No, it's not a problem. It was more shocking just how identical it was.
And shocking because everybody thinks Tarantino is the most
original.
People think he just pulls it out of his ass.
Right,
He just makes. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, just a note. Yeah, not something I'm knocking this film over, and I'm not retroactively knocking Django, for instance.
Right.
What I mean?
Right.
So, but very, very interesting to note. Moving on to some of the bad, because again, unfortunately, this does not escape having some criticism to it. The sound quality is a very, very slight to very large problem. And I'm not talking about the soundtrack, because obviously that's like knocked out of the park by James Brown, but there's just a weird sound mixing. There is so much ambient noise to the recording. Most scenes have one sound effects track played over. In certain scenes, it's a very loud shoe shine sound effect. Other times, it's traffic noises that blare over dialogue that I had to put closed captioning on. It's a shame because, I mean, the positive note is very much the sound, but a negative note is the sound as well. So, I don't know. I was scratching my head. I think what really did it for me was Again, a scene that was just normal dialogue and a character in the background is shining a shoe, and it is just the loudest whipping of a towel. It's just slapping the leather of the shoe. It's so loud. I was shocked by it. I would say, once again, this film uses villain characters as an excuse for being chock full of racial slurs and laying them into the dialogue. I would say it's at critical mass here, though, and almost half of the dialogue is slinging slurs.
Really?
And my criticism is identical. On a film level, it's just lazy, bad writing, and that's using it as a crutch. And for the perspective of the special, I think this is far more damaging than being concerned audiences are looking up to a criminal. This feels much more real as a concern, in the dialogue there. And like I said in the review, at least in Superfly, Priest is looking to get out of the game from the very start. Here, Tommy Gibbs, his only desire is to do more crime. His only desire is to stick it to the people that, did him wrong. It's a vengeance story. So, that still does make an entertaining gangster film, but this is one that I definitely saw what the problems could be then and even problems now, because again, it really just boils down to very lazy writing this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think it would get repetitive and it would lose its punch.
Yeah.
It would just lose it. And at that point, it's just, now we're just dealing with slur after slur just to be it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think of it this way. If a crappy horror film just would layer in F-bombs or just curses because they have the rated R rating anyway, you'd call that lazy writing. Same concept.
Yeah, same deal. Yeah, absolutely.
I will say I slightly debated, so kind of with a few of these, pulling this from the special for different reasons. I really believe this was the most important watch, though, to satisfy my curiosities for the era. It really all came together with Black Caesar.
Wow, okay.
Walking into these films, I knew I loved the soundtracks already. I knew I liked the style through Tarantino ripping them off, but I could not tell you why Blaxploitation was problematic as a term and what it really meant. Black Caesar genuinely has an excellent story, feels like a modern gangster film, but finally I felt and I saw how these problematic aspects could chip away at the good experience I had with the film. And I think it really was an aha moment. It was a light bulb moment to say, oh, I finally get it now. And it's interesting because Black Caesar does have a lot to offer. It's because of what that Newsweek article was concerned with, glorification washing over struggle. That is the problem that Black Caesar has with this. For the ratings, this film wins big and loses a lot more. I think if these problems were both in production quality, in context, if they had a little bit more care put into them, it would have been up there with Superfly, honestly, because there's a lot of originality here, but there's also a lot of problems, and it's also just a very messy film. It's like, I don't understand some of the problems it has.
Budget, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Which ties into that whole, I think a through line is, to understand the era is to understand who's making the films, and that ultimately is the studio. And as with any movie, it's for money, but I think that's an important context to understand these films. So with Black Caesar, we are going to go ahead and give it a 69.
Oh, wow. Okay, 69. That's that's still a pretty all right film.
Still pretty all right film.
I mean, when you're flirting with 70, 70s are pretty good films. So that's 69. That's not bad at all.
And I think specifically it doesn't crack 70s for a lot of reasons, mainly some of these technical issues, again, with that sound. It's just what is happening? But
better than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Because, again, if anything, let it illustrate that it could have had the heights of Superfly, but kind of falls into the genericness of what the worst of the era can be, and didn't rise above to the cream at the top, basically.
Wow. Man, okay, all right, so 69 for Black Caesar. Interesting. So Fred Williamson being Tommy Gibbs in this, and then he did others, he did Hell Up in Harlem, where I think he's playing the same character.
Oh, really?
Also came out in 1973.
Oh, wow. Quick turnaround.
It's all just very, he plays Tommy Gibbs again. It's just... so confusing.
Yeah. And definitely with Shaft and probably this, a lot of sequels spawned, because if anything hit out of those. You know, they
Right.
latched onto them right away.
Here's a question. So we know we're dealing with a 4-year span in the era, kind of 71 to 75. I'm surprised to see none in 74 or 75 here on our list.
Right.
Is it because at that point it's been there, done that?
I
It's
think
played out.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of been there, done that. Like I said, Dolomite comes out in 75. Definitely an honorable mention here.
So that's next. Yeah. So let's get into
Sure.
what honorable mentions do we have?
Dolomite and Blackula, basically. Those are the two there.
Interesting. So not Black Dynamite.
Well, I mean, Black Dynamite is definitely
such an absurd
using it as a comedy presence. I don't think it would be it itself.
Okay.
Though.
And Dolomite, you're right. It is getting new. Was it redone recently?
Yeah, it was,
okay.
or a sequel. I honestly don't know.
Okay.
It was Eddie Murphy with it. So.
Oh, right,
Yeah,
of course.
I think Amazon had big money behind it as well. I hear actually great movies, great things about that movie.
We might have to check it out then in the future.
Yeah. So, but yeah, very interesting. Hopefully, I've been able to give perspective to this. You know,
I think so. It's a weird. It's a weird thing. Again, just the word blaxploitation just doesn't sound good.
You're right.
You know, but
to walk on eggshells with it. But
at the same time, we have a huge amount of films in a very short period of time that were meant. I mean, it's just like you said, studios pumping it out. Yeah. Mostly all black cast, meant for mostly all black audiences. And these things exist. Be amazing soundtracks.
Yeah. Amazing soundtracks. Sometimes amazing films. And again, has a place in modern day because these films are taken from. They are source material for a lot of filmmakers.
Right.
So to study that, to see if they're worth your time as the source material, again, that was at the root of my curiosity, and the root of my curiosity being that I liked one part of it already.
Yeah.
But still could not answer the question of why the term was problematic and why it was, a tough thing to wrap your head around. So these are the type of time. These are the times that a special. It's about discovery for me as well, and this was a perfect example of curiosity fueling what I was diving into in my watching.
Very cool, Vin. All right, I love that we did this.
Yeah.
That was a good special. It was pretty snappy too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, not too long. Like the film. That's why. Yeah.
No, this was a good time. I can't wait to check out Superfly. Really, I mean, an 82 on the list is unbelievable.
Absolutely.
But speaking of which, so looking at these, Vin, is there anything you want to add? Or are we going to roll credits here on this special?
I think we're mostly good. I would say if you have folks at home any thoughts on what would be maybe more essential aside from these musicians,
it is tough to pluck
from
this. Like putting an essential thing together, it is difficult.
Yeah.
You know, I'm glad you paired up with the music because that in itself is so essential to the films.
Yeah. And it was kind of like worst case scenario, listen to the soundtrack. Not that I recommend music that much, but yeah. Curious to see, and if anything, with like you brought up, with more of a modern film, folks at home, do you feel there is something that represents this era of film, but not necessarily in the year span? Very curious to hear. So.
Awesome, Vin. Vin, thank you so much for doing the research, for doing this special for us. Folks at home, we'll run it down one more time. We have Shaft with a 63%, Superfly with an 82%, Trouble Man with a 35%, Across 110th Street with a 52%, and finally Black Caesar with the 69%. Folks, we thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Daily Ratings Podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, if you would, could you give us a good rating or tell a friend about us? If you're wondering if a film is worth a watch, or if you'd just like to see more movie ratings from Vince, be sure to stop by thedailyratings.com, where we have our ever-expanding catalog of films. Also, if you found value in the podcast or our site, become a producer and go to the donations tab on thedailyratings.com. You can donate whatever amount of value you feel you see from us. We're looking to build this into something large and great, but also be independent from those corporate sponsors. So we greatly appreciate any support from you all. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time on the Daily Ratings Podcast.